What's happening, guys? Today I have an awesome video. A question I get asked all the time: what is the best training split for female athletes? Do I need to do full body workouts? Should I do upper and lower? Or do I need to do a leg day and then a back day and then a chest day and an arm day? All that and more coming up in this video. Let's do it. And in this channel, we don't just tell you what to do. We like to dive into the science, explain how the body works, and then you can decide for yourself what best fits your goals. Because there's no workout that's going to be one size fits all. Everybody has different goals, which means everyone has different needs for their training. So let's start with what happens to your body when you train. If you're a beginner and you haven't been training very long, most of your gains are going to occur in the first 20 hours, and then it usually takes about 48 hours for you to recover. And that makes sense. So if you have a tough workout, you're usually sore for 2 days after. So then in 48 hours, you're ready to go again. So then you could, of course, train again. You recover in that first 20 hours, but it takes 48 hours to fully recover. And then you can go again. And 48 hours to recover. So realistically, it's recommended for beginners to train about 3 times a week. And that makes sense. If you're doing a good, solid 45-minute or 60-minute workout, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you're going to be sore, but you're not overtraining, you're not undertraining, you're good to go. Now, if you've been training for about a year to 2 years, so you're a little bit closer to that intermediate level, you're going to be able to recover faster, okay? So the more training you do, the better your body gets at recovering. So for intermediates, it is found that most of the recovery happens in the first 10 hours, and they're usually fully recovered in about 24 hours, or a little bit longer, but it's usually 24. So for an intermediate, they can go right back and train again the next day. Again and again. They might want to take a day off. But you can see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 training days for an intermediate. And again, that makes sense. If you've been training for a little bit longer, you're usually only sore for a day. Next day, you can get after it again, all right? And you can work out a few more times in the week, and you won't be quite as overwhelmed as a brand new beginner. So what does this information tell us? Well, there's been a lot of really good studies recently with training frequency and muscle growth. And I'll leave a link here and also in the description with a really good study. But what it's basically saying is, if you want to maximize your muscle growth, is you need to train each muscle group at least 2 to 3 times a week. All right, so 2 to 3 times, keep that in mind. So if we're talking about our beginners who are only training 3 times a week, and if you want to maximize, you need to hit each muscle group 2 to 3 times a week, you pretty much either have to do full body for all 3, all right, so you're training the entire body, lots of functional movements, full body compound movements, every single session, or you could break it up. You could do 1 lower, 1 upper, and then 1 full body. So that's what I recommend to all my athletes. You're either going full body all the time, or you're going a mix, 1 lower, 1 upper, and 1 full body, okay? And then that way, you're hitting every muscle group at least twice a week, or if you're doing the full body, 3 times a week. Now for our intermediates, let's say you're training 5 times a week, all right? So you're racking up quite a few sessions. Keep in mind that 2 to 3 times a week to maximize your gains, all right? Now we can look at either, if you did full body for all 5, I think you would absolutely wreck yourself. You might get away with it for a week or 2, but full body 5 times a week, man, that would be tough. Unless you're doing like 30, 40-minute sessions, I would break it up into lower, upper, lower, upper. So if you go lower, upper, and then maybe a full body over here, that is your 3 times you've hit your lower and 3 times you've hit your upper. All right, that would be absolutely perfect. The other time I would recommend to extend that out, if you're looking at a 6th session in a week, let's say you're crazy and you're doing 6 sessions in a week, then you could go to a push-pull legs, push-pull legs. So then we've trained each muscle group twice in that week. So push would be like any pushing movement where you're pushing away from your body. Pulling would be, again, pulling towards your body. And then legs, of course, is a leg movement, okay? So your push-pull legs would be an option if you're training 6 times a week. You're still getting every muscle group twice in a week, okay? Not to say that if you train 6 times a week, you might go full body, lower, upper, full body, lower, upper. That's another way of breaking up, all right? So you can change it up, but keep in mind, you want to train every muscle group 2 to 3 times a week. That is the magic number for getting those muscle gains. Now, before you ask, what about those huge bodybuilders who are absolutely jacked and they do leg day, back day, chest day, arm day? You need to keep in mind that if you're on performance enhancing drugs, so if you're on steroids, then your recovery looks very different from this graph over here. So I'm going to explain very quickly, but keep in mind this only applies to people who are on steroids, all right, taking performance enhancing drugs. This is what their recovery graph would look like. They train legs, and it takes them 6 days with those anabolic steroids to fully recover because they're absolutely destroying themselves. Next day, they train arms, and they train back. Then they train chest. Then they train shoulders. So it takes them 5-6 days to fully recover because what's happening is the steroids are actually causing each muscle group to make gains to go through protein synthesis for 4, 5, 6 days, all right, depending on how much dosage they're having and how hard they trained. So their graph looks completely different to ours because it's taken them so long, all right? They don't need to train legs 3 times a week. They probably don't even have to do it twice a week. Once a week is almost enough completely there because the steroids are changing the way their body works. So that is the only time where you're going to get the most gains from doing that kind of bro split where it's each muscle group once a week. Okay, so keep that in mind. It is not recommended to maximize your gains if you're not on performance enhancing drugs. So from the information we've learned from this study, we can then draw a rough guide on the best training split depending on how often you train during the week. Keep in mind this is a rough template because it does depend on your goals specifically. But if you're working out 2 to 3 times a week, you probably want to aim for full body workouts. If you're working out 4 to 5 times a week, you'd want to split that into lower and upper. And if you're working out 6 times a week, you probably want to break that up into push-pull legs to maximize those gains. As always, thanks for sticking around and watching, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. And coming very soon, we have an entire at-home workout series that you can do yourself. We'll see you in that next video.